Yeah. So if you're listening to us out there, if you're sorry about that on the radio, but we just got live on our Facebook page, so you have to excuse that slight interruption that we had. We had just a little bit of it's like gets me off track right here when I'm trying to deal with all these things at the same time. But I was just talking about for all those people out there who are out there working. I know a lot of us have ended our year, and we're with Christmas and New Year's being on Monday. We kind of get a little bit of time off. But if you're not and you're out there working, thanks. I just wanted to say thanks to you. I wanted to say thanks to all those people who are driving trucks and running grocery stores and keeping the power on and protecting us and protecting the streets and all the things that you do out there that you're working and you're staying after it. I appreciate you working out there, and just want you to know somebody. I know there's a lot of us out there that appreciate you. So um, I hope everybody gets to have a Merry Christmas and see their families and enjoy their time together. And I was we've had a good week. We've had some really good shows. I think we've been breaking down some things. We have walked through some different thoughts this week, and one of the thoughts that we worked through on Monday out of the book of Micah was Bethlehem and what a small place it was, and it was there really wasn't much to it really, and to think for a second that that was the center of the universe, and it was the place where I wanted to say thanks to all those people for a second. I got all kinds of things going on right here today. I can't even figure this thing out. I apologize for my lack of professionalism on this Friday night. Trying to get all this put together, and it's just not working good tonight. So, um, no, Bethlehem is a tiny little place, right? And that's where God decided that Jesus was going to come from. He was going to enter into this earth, and he was going to be born, and he was going to be born in in a little old. He was going to be born in a barn in Bethlehem, and the guy made a huge impact on the planet while he was here, and he's been making a huge impact on the planet since he's been gone. And so I got to talking to a lady today, and it reminded me of a story. And I just thought that I'd bring it up and share it with you um, on this weekend wrap up show, and talk to you just a little bit about this story that I had one time. And it's sometimes I can tell before I even start this story that I get emotional about it. And I don't know if I don't remember if I brought it up on the show before. Um, but I'm going to tell it again tonight because we're getting close to Christmas, and thinking about coming from a small town, and wondering whether or not anything we do makes a difference, and wondering whether or not if we're really, if anybody even cares, or if anything, if we even have the capacity to make a difference in the world. And and it reminds me when I graduated chiropractic school, I had two best friends um, from Roswell, where I grew up. I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico. We moved there when I was in fifth grade to that horse ranch, and I had two best friends and one of them I met in the fifth grade, and the other one it wasn't until I kind of met him in junior high, and then in high school we got to be good friends. But um, the one from fifth grade, he grew up in a little town that was called Midway, and it was more like a community. And I just looked it up because it was halfway. It was midway between Roswell and Dexter. And Dexter, New Mexico, has a population of 1,072. And so my friend grew up between Roswell and Dexter, and in this little community called Midway, and their population is 638. So living out here in West Texas or wherever you're living, there's small towns around you somewhere. Well, Roswell's not that big of a town altogether, and then Dexter is really small, 1,072 people, and then Midway was halfway between, and it was less than that. So Midway is just a very small community, and there's not much there. and there's not much money there, and there's a church there, and there's a fire department there, and so my friend Tim, he was one of four boys and a girl. His mom and dad had four boys and a girl, and the girl got married, and so the brother-in-law was there, and they were pretty much the Midway volunteer fire department. Like the whole time we were in school, Tim carried a little pager everywhere he went, and if you heard the beeps, you could hear the beeps, and then Tim would be gone. Like we were in high school, if those beeps were right on his little pager, then that was that. And if you're young, you have no idea what a pager is, but it's kind of like a cell phone without the ability to talk on it. But all of us older people understand what a pager was. But Tim had that pager, and he used to carry that pager with him, and um, and sometimes I accused him of just using those beeps to get out of class, because sometimes I think he actually did that. The beeps would go off, and he'd just tell the teacher, "I got to go," and really, it didn't have anything to do with his fire department. But but most of the time it did. He was a good dude, and but they were the whole fire department basically. I used to laugh because they would every 2 years they'd have elections at the fire department at Midway, and they just switch positions. The brothers and stuff would just switch positions and then say, "All right, you be the captain," or whatever, And if dad didn't want to do it, and so Tim had a big brother named Ornell, and his daddy's name was Ornell. So this was Junior, and Junior, it, it- like if you could just picture what a poor, I don't want to use I don't want to use the white trash version of a sentence of a description, because that's wrong to talk about. They were that way. They did not have very much money. They lived in an old kind of beat up house. All the guys just kind of drove beat up cars. Tim's car was all put together. He had one of those AMC Jeeps, and it it was all just it was torn up on the inside and would fall apart, and they just have to keep it together with duct tape and baling wire and all that stuff, right? And and Junior wasn't a very fit guy. He was about 300 pounds, and he worked out there at the fire department, and I don't know what else he did. He did other jobs, but he never had any money, and he wasn't an impressive looking fella, and he wasn't a highly educated guy. He was just I mean, if you didn't know any better and you just saw him, you just might think that Junior was just a fat, poor white dude, and from the country. Like what he was not all that super impressive, and he was a nice fella and all that stuff. But I'm just saying, like, if you probably wouldn't go. I wouldn't have gone to Junior for advice for something, or anything back in the day. He was just Tim's big brother, and that was pretty much kind of what I thought of him. But he was up at the fire station one night, and he was getting ready to leave, and he put one arm in the sleeve of his coat, and the other arm, before he could get the other arm in the sleeve of his coat, he had a heart attack and died right there on the floor of the Midway Fire Department. So Tim calls me, and he tells me, and I can feel it coming. I can feel the emotion coming on this. So if I break loose down a little bit, you're just gonna have to forgive me. But it's just an awesome story. Um, but Tim calls me and he tells me that Junior has passed away, and I thought I could get by this. I thought I could get by the show without getting emotional about it, but um, I'm not going to. But I'm still going to tell the story, and I may have already told the story, but I don't remember. But I'm telling it again anyway. So got ready, and I was going to go to the funeral, and what I was expecting was nothing really. I mean, I didn't expect anybody to be at the church, and I didn't think it was going to be any big deal at all. I didn't know Junior he wasn't all that impressive fella to me. I didn't really know much about him, to tell you the truth. But and so I went to Roswell, and I pulled up to the church, and it's kind of on the south side of town, and it's a little bit kind of on the edge of town, so it's kind of sitting out there by itself. And I pulled up to the church, and I saw like the parking lot was just packed. And if I don't know if you ever been to a fireman's funeral or not, but the the line on the street was, I mean, it was several, it was several hundred yards long, if it wasn't a mile long. I don't know, but there was so many fire trucks and sheriff's cars and police cars and all those things that were just lined up all the way on the road. And I went into the church, and the first thing I did, when I pulled up, I just couldn't believe that I was there. I was like, "Am I at the right place?" Like, I thought I was coming to Junior's funeral, and I don't understand why all these people are here. There's a lot of people here, and so um, I went into the church, and my other best friend's mom just happened to see me, and 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 she said, "Come sit with me." Well, I was about like I am right now. Like, I just don't do those. I don't do funerals good. I'm emotional, get emotional about stuff like that. And so I was like, man, this is gonna be rough. And I'm not on how I'm gonna get past this deal. And so I went in there and I sat next to Mary, and Ron, Junior's little brother, is a pastor. And he's the pastor at the Midway Church, or at least he was back in the whenever this happened. This was early 2000s whenever this happened. And Ron, he told a story, and he said, you know, when I first started preaching at the Midway Church, I couldn't understand. We just kind of had two sets of pews, one on the right and one on the left. And he said, I couldn't ever figure out how come everybody would come in and everybody sat on the right side um, um, of the church. And he said, so he got there early one day, and he was watching to see why everybody sat on the right side of the church. He thought maybe that the air conditioning was better on that side, or the sound was better on that side, or something like that. And what he saw was Junior was sitting at the back of the church, and he had his arm over the pew, and people people would come by. Sorry, I didn't think I was going to get this emotional about the story, but people would come by, and Junior had a bag of candy that he set next to him, and he would just take out of that bag of candy and he would drop it over the back of the pew to anybody that wanted a piece of candy when they came into the church. And that's why everybody would sit on that side. They would sit on that side, and because they wanted a piece of candy. And so Ron, and I'm sorry, but Ron, he reached down underneath the podium and he pulled out this bag of candy. And he said, if you would like to have a bag of candy, I got one for you. I mean, if you'd like to have a piece of candy. And so he just handed the candy to all the people at the funeral. And all these people started walking up to the front. And I'm like, there's had to have been, I don't know, half a Midway what must have gone up there. Like, I don't know how many people just went up to get him a piece of candy and from Junior. And then they had this open mic. And during the open mic session, they just had a bunch of people. They just said, if you had anything that you would like to say about Junior, come on up to the front. And so they just came up to the front, and one after the other, they just kept coming up there, and they just kept, one after the other would just talk about when they were having a rough time. One day, one guy said, I was having a really rough time one day. And Junior said, hey, let's just go get a Coke and talk about it. And then another guy came up and he said, I really was not doing well one day. And Junior just came up and said, hey, let's go get a burrito. We'll just go get a burrito and we'll drive around. We'll just talk. We'll just work it out. which was really funny because that's probably how Junior got to be 300 pounds, and that's probably why he had a heart attack at the fire station, is because he's always eating Cokes and burritos and everything from Awesome. And and so they one person after the next just kept coming up there and talking about what an impact this this fat boy from Midway that didn't have a dime, that he just kept making an impact on people's lives. And one of the guys said, I was really in a bind one time, and Junior gave me $200. And if you knew the family and you knew Junior, like $200 was a lot of money. That was a lot of money that to him to give somebody. He just gave it to them because he knew they needed it. And then after, of course, I was about like I am right now. I was just like I was blown away by the impact that he made. And I think that is why it's so emotional for me to tell that story. And then we went out to the gravesite, and I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this before, but when a fireman is buried, they have the last call, and they come up on the radio and they run the little beeps on the radio, and they do the last call. And man, you talk about, whew, that was tough to watch. And that day I just sat out there, and I just sat out there, and I was the last one to leave. I sit there, and while everybody else left, and they gave their condolences to the family, and they went through that whole thing. I didn't want to leave that day because I'd seen a piece of heaven. I saw sorry. I saw a guy who came from nowhere, who didn't care what he looked like, and he didn't care. He didn't care how much money he had. He didn't care what kind of car he drove. He didn't care if he combed his hair or he didn't comb his hair. What he cared about was loving people and caring for people. And when it's all said and done, that was going to be the only thing that mattered. And I thought about that story today because I was telling a lady that, because she was saying that she didn't know what she should do with her life because she's got this physical ailment and it's bothering her, and she's afraid that the physical ailment's going to be too much for people to handle, and it's holding her back in her life. And I remembered being there at that gravesite and thinking to myself that I didn't want to leave that space because I got to see a little piece of heaven just for a moment. It was one of the most impactful moments in my entire life. It was such a beautiful sight to see. And I promised myself right there at that gravesite that, it doesn't make any difference if you sound like a country hick when you talk. It doesn't make any difference if you can't get all the words right. It doesn't make any difference if you can't get your show to be as good as you want your show to be. It doesn't make any difference if you wear blue jeans to work or slacks to work or any of those things. Like, all those things are just excuses that people use to try to keep from being the person that they're supposed to be. And when it's all said and done, at the end of your life, it's not going to make a flipping difference. None of that stuff matters. And it's just the impact that you made on people's lives. And it doesn't make any difference where you're from. It doesn't make any difference how much you weigh. It doesn't make any difference whether or not you're drinking Cokes every day or you're not. Those things keep you from maybe keep you from dying, but they don't keep you from living. They don't keep you from they don't keep you from being what you can be if you just let it go and do it. And so I just I just wanted to tell that story as a story of encouragement to just say, look, everybody's got something. Junior had plenty of reasons not to be the man that he was. And, you know, if I can someday be, if I can measure up to being as close to a man as he was and make an impact on people's life, when it's all said and done about me, I'll just be happy with that. Like that's plenty good enough for me because I've seen it. I've seen that little piece of heaven and what it does for people and the impact that it makes in their life when you just go be you. You just do it the best you can and you get on a dad blame show and you just cry and you just mumble it all up and it doesn't make any difference. That's why I can tell the story. I can tell the story without hesitation. And sometimes I know that it's coming, and sometimes like I can get through it without being emotional. But most of the time, I can't get through it without being emotional. And I sure didn't think I was going to be this emotional tonight. But Jesus did the same thing. Jesus came from Bethlehem. Now I understand he had the power of God on his side. That was kind of helpful, but so do we, really. But he made Bethlehem a place that people will travel to. He made an impact enough that we will celebrate his birthday, whether it's exactly his birthday or not. Who cares? Like that's like, but we will celebrate his birthday, and we'll make a holiday season out of it, and we'll make something that we all come together in our families and we have a moment in our communities where we just actually stop for a second and just love each other. And if every one of us could do that same thing, if we could take those examples that Jesus said, because that's what Junior was doing. He was taking those examples and he was saying, "Hey, look, I'll just shine my light as bright as I can, and I'll just do the best I can with it, and I hope that I can make an impact in somebody's life." And he sure did. And so his name was Ornell Fuller Jr. He was from Midway, and he was he wasn't much to look at, but he was obviously he had a light shining inside of him that was as good as any light of any person that's ever walked this earth. And he made the best that he could with the people that he got to be around. And it's sad that he left us early. He was only, I think he was like, I don't know, maybe he was 40 years old or in his 40s or something like that, um, so, when he had his heart attack. And maybe late 40s. I don't remember exactly how old he was, but um, he's made an impact. His whole family's like that. They're all just good folks. Tim's one of my best friends, and he's he's that same kind of guy. He'll just give you the shirt off his back and do anything for you. And I sure hope the story makes a difference in your life. I hope that it wasn't too hard to listen to with me getting emotional going through it. And I've been thinking about it all afternoon, and I was like, all right, you can say it without getting, without getting all that emotional about it. But sometimes it just comes on me. It just comes on me because it was such a beautiful thing that I got to experience. And let's just don't forget what Monday was all about. What this coming Monday is all about. It's about a guy that did that same thing for us. That we can, no matter what we think about ourselves, or no matter what obstacle we think that we have, we can make a difference in people's lives if we just try and just tell someone you love them and remember what this thing's all about. Hey, we're going to take a break on the radio. I'm going to get recomposed, and we're going to talk about some sugar or something, whatever. I got some things for the next part of the show, so we'll be back. Well, you're going to have to give me a minute out there, y'all. So I didn't expect for that to be. quite so emotional. I'm gonna just take just a second, and I'll be right back. Okay, everybody, we're back. This is Jason Clemmons, and you are listening to Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. And for those of you who are still sticking around after the first part of that show, God bless you right there. That was that was a little bit not expected. What I was That's not what was expecting for this evening and the first part of the show. But hey, you know what? I'm not scared of it. Sometimes you just got to let it go, and that story is hard to tell without getting emotional. And I may have already told it on this show, but before, just in case you're new to the show, you'll have an opportunity to see it. And if you missed it, might be worth going back and looking at. So um, hopefully, you can go back and look at it. So let's talk a little bit about our favorite subject. What I really found out was about this Christmas. I found out something that I think is really funny. And we studied Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life on Wednesday, and one of the things with all the hours of time that I was spent watching Jordan Peterson, one of the things that he kind of pointed out to me in one of those videos was in one of those teachings was that every person, and Dr. DeMartini, we talked about Dr. DeMartini in the past as well. Dr. DeMartini has talked about it too. Both those guys had mentioned that pretty much every person has every trait. So you can find yourself, say, well, I could never be a killer or something, right? I could never kill somebody. But what Dr. Peterson showed me was that yeah, if you do about three or four things, we do about three or four scenarios that we put you in, like it wouldn't. It's not that far away from you finding out how what all the depths the worst of you that can come out, that you could find yourself being in that situation that would actually do that for you. And so um, I'm pretty much a holiday guy. I'm all about the holidays. I love the Christmas time. I love 4th of July. I love Valentine's Day. Um, I'm a fan of all that stuff. But one thing, I might have said it last night. One thing I found out about is that if you're the guy that tells people not to eat sugar at Christmas time, you are really getting in touch with you. You kind of become the Grinch, right? You get in touch with your Grinch self whenever you're the guy that tells people that maybe we ought not to be eating sugar. Because I've been doing that for the last several weeks and listening to everybody talk about all these Christmas cookies that they're eating and all these parties that they've been to and all these desserts that they're making and all this peanut brittle and all this stuff that they got to take to their friends and family and all the things that they do. And I'm like, you guys really shouldn't do that. Like, you really ought to consider you ought to consider maybe not eating all that sugar. It's bad for you. And so I accept it. I accept it that my Grinch has emerged in itself, and I know, but I'm not going to quit saying it. I'm going to keep on sharing it with you, and hopefully maybe you can understand it. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it tonight educationally, because I don't want this show to be a beatdown every time someone listens to it. I want it to be fearful. I don't want it to be miserable. I don't want it to be negative. I want it to show, hey, look, like, you can live an awesome life. You can live an awesome life, and you can live a clean life, and you don't need all that stuff. And there's a reason that I keep bringing it up to you. There's a reason that I keep trying to show it to you. And what interesting thing, they had like a little coffee and tea thing this morning at the workout deal. Kim brought some up for the ladies that work out on Friday, and there was some coffee left over. And so I thought, I'll just have me a little cup of coffee. Like, I haven't had, gave up coffee about 5 or 6 weeks ago, 4 or 5 weeks ago, whatever it was now. And I was just like, I think I'll just have, I've had coffee one time in the last 4 or 5 weeks, whatever it's been. And I thought to myself, I'll just have one little cup of coffee. It's Friday, it's Christmas. I'll just, whatever. Right. And, and I had that coffee, and it didn't take 15 minutes. Matter of fact, while I was still drinking the coffee, my headache came back. Like, that one little piece gave me a headache, and I had gotten a massive headache 4 or 5 weeks ago when I decided that I wasn't going to drink coffee anymore. I got a massive headache at that time, and I was like, man, I didn't even. Oh, it was miserable. The day I decided to quit drinking coffee, that night I got a massive headache. The next day I didn't feel too good, and then after that I was pretty much fine, and I've been super great ever since. Haven't needed it. Don't crave it all that much. I miss it because I miss a little bit of the heat on it, but other than that, that I don't. But this morning when I had just a little bit of it, it was amazing to me how it brought my headache back. It wasn't a massive, horrible headache or anything, but it did bring my headache back. And I thought to myself, dude, that's probably the last cup of coffee I'm having. Why would I do that? Why would I break free and get clean of that and let my body get rid of all that caffeine and then turn right back around and then make myself miserable again? So I want to be encouraging when we're talking about health. I don't always want to be negative about when we're talking about health. So that's what last night's show was about, was to try to say, hey, look, if you want some help, we'll give you some help. We'll help you live a healthier life. You don't have to worry about that. And so that's there's a positive to being healthy. There's a positive to getting yourself clean and free of all this stuff. And so you say, everybody's always wondering, why are you always talking about sugar? Let me just show you. I put together a little slideshow if you go to our website, and it's the Rock Health and Wellness. We have two different ones. We have the Rock Health and Wellness .com, and that website is for the public, for anybody who wants to see us, and it has all the search engine and stuff and the guys. It's a professional website. The other one, and if you ever go to it, you can tell, is one that I did myself, and it's for the Rock Health, and that's for kind of internal educational purposes, or anybody that wants to know stuff that's a little bit more personal about what we do. And so I'm not trying to get all the search engine stuff with that one as much as I am with the other one. But we have a video on there, and it's called "Sugar the Bitter Truth." You can go all the way over to more on the side of the website and click on that. Click on videos, and it's Robert Lustig that we've mentioned multiple times. We mentioned him this week that he's on the podcast with Dr. Huberman, and so I put together a little slideshow for you just so that you might be able to understand a little bit better what exactly I'm talking about, what I learned from Dr. Lustig, and this was like 2009 or 10 or something, maybe 11 when we put that on the website, and these are the things that he showed me. So these are straight off of that video. These are conversations that are straight off of that video, and it's a little bit of difference between glucose and fructose. And one of the books that he recommends that goes back to 1972 by a guy named John Yudkin, and I think he said he was a British guy, but it's called Pure, White, and Deadly, and that he basically mapped it all out. If you want to go search for a book and you want to try to find a book that is that's very impactful, then that Pure, White, and Deadly is a book that you might consider. And then it's like, well, where did it come from? Where did this whole idea, what is this whole obesity thing, and what is this sugar thing, and what is it how did we get there? And it was from this guy that worked, and his name was Ansel Keys, and he did this 7-country study, and he in the process of doing his study, he thought that he had tied fat into being fat. He thought that he had tied the countries that eat the most fat are the most fat. And when Dr. Lustig does a really good job on the video of just tearing that down and showing you how that was wrong, how his analysis from a statistics standpoint had a flaw in it. And what he basically sold us was this whole idea that fat makes you fat. And so he was trying to tell us that he based on his study, and really it goes along with all the other things I say, like that I have learned over the years. I got into a conversation this week about evidence-based medicine. When keep seeing this commercial, there's a new hospital in Lubbock, and they have got this big workout facility. It's super awesome. They got millions of dollars, and they've done a fantastic job, looks like. But on the commercial, they keep talking about evidence-based medicine. And I'm telling you, that's a crock of crap, if you ask me. I think that statement, evidence-based, is a big crock of crap. Because that's what they try to tell us, right? That's what this thing tried to tell us at one point in our life. Like the 7-country study tried to tell us that fat makes you fat. It's evidence-based. Everybody that read it would have argued it. Matter of fact, in 1982, the American Heart Association, the American Medical Association, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture recommended we decrease our fat consumption from 30 to 40%. And so at the time, I guarantee you they were going to argue that was evidence-based. We have evidence that says you should do it this way. You got to be careful about that. You got to be careful about that. So when people come at you with evidence-based practice, evidence-based medicine, or any of that stuff, watch out. Watch out. There's an agenda on the other side of that deal that I'm not buying. I'm not buying it at all. I'm not saying that you shouldn't follow science. I'm not saying you shouldn't follow neurology. I'm not saying that you shouldn't follow biology. But to say that something is not legitimate because someone else has some sort of study about it or whatever, be careful. So we got pushed away from eating fat, and we got pushed towards carbohydrates, and we got tricked into taking the fiber out of our food, and it changed the way that we eat. And so one of this picture right here, and what I just want you to see, and for you guys that are listening to us, just go back and watch us on the Rock Health and Wellness Center's Facebook page, and just see right there where This is a molecule of DHA. This is the DHA molecule that the molecular structure of what is what I've got right there of DHA, and I want you to just see how they're different. And this was a form of a fatty acid right there, and so we've all been told that calorie in, calorie out. A calorie is a calorie. If you take too many calories, you're going to get fat. You got to decrease your calories, all this sort of thing, right? That's what we've been told from forever. And it gets into the idea that the idea behind it is the first law of thermodynamics, which says energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be converted from one form to another. And so if you want to talk about a calorie as a calorie, I can break down a couple of things for you right here, like one can of soda. So one can of soda is 150 calories. Now it depends on how big, you know, the nowadays we've got bottles and all the rest of that stuff. But this is coming right from Dr. Lustig. A can of soda is 150 calories. 100. If you drink one Coke a day for 365 days, you're going to get 54,750 calories. Well, if you increase 3,500 calories is equivalent to 1 pound. So that's the way that's always been done. 3,500 calories is equivalent to 1 pound. So if you have one Coke a day at 150 calories over 365 days, that's 54,750 calories. If you divide that by 3,500, you're going to gain 15.64 pounds per year. Or reverse engineer that and realize that you have just right off the bat, if you're a Coke drinker, if you're a soda drinker, if you're ingesting those calories right there, if you're in any way that you can decrease your calories, if you can if you can stop drinking your calories in 2024, you can already lose 15 pounds just by stopping drinking your calories. Cut out that 150 calories and just watch what happens to you when we're doing this same show next year at the same time. Look and see exactly what ends up happening to you. So what they did is they brought in the early 70s, they came up with high fructose corn syrup. And relatively, sucrose is table sugar. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here in just a second. And sucrose is 50% glucose and 50% fructose. Well, high fructose corn syrup is about 55% fructose, but it's sweeter than sucrose. And glucose, which is just the glucose molecule, which is really sugar, we really should break that down. When we talk about that, we should talk about glucose and fructose and sucrose so that we understand what sugars we're talking about. But glucose is not as sweet. When you add the fructose to it, it makes it sweeter. When you increase the amount of fructose, it even makes it sweeter. And if you just go plain fructose, it's sweeter as relatively at whatever the unit is 173 for fructose. High fructose corn syrup is 120, and sucrose is 100, and glucose is 74. So you can see where as you add fructose to things get sweeter. And so what if you look at it, it gets down to chemistry. There's a serious issue with those two molecules, because if you look at, they have the same molecular structure. There's C6H12O6. That 6 carbons, 12 hydrogen, and 6 oxygens is what makes up that carbohydrate right there, that glucose and the fructose. But the way you put it together is different. Glucose is a 6-membered ring. So we're looking at a picture of glucose, and we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The ring in the middle of the glucose is 6. Now you come over here and look at the fructose, and the fructose is a 5-membered ring. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The ring in the middle of the fructose is a 5-membered ring. The ring around the glucose is a 6-membered ring. And you think to yourself, what difference does that make? Well, how does a tire that is full of air function versus a tire that's flat? they function differently, right? The structure matters. If you have a tire that's flat and just try to drive your car on it, it's not going to drive very well. If you got a flat bicycle tire, try to ride that across town. That's not going to work very well. The structure of the rubber is exactly the same, but it's not the material of the rubber is exactly the same, but the structure of the tire is different because one of them has air in it, one of them doesn't. So inside the body, those two things are different. The way that your body processes those two chemicals is different. Those two structures is different. And if we go back and we look at and we say, well, where's the what does the fatty acid look like? Well, that's a totally different structure. So that DHA is a structure, and your body says, hey, I can use that right there. I want to use that. When you look at glucose, every cell in your body is going to use glucose. And when you look at fructose, no cell in the body wants to use fructose. It's going to go to your liver because your body's going to recognize that structure and it's going to send it to your liver. And your liver, it is considered a toxin in the liver. The fructose is considered a toxin. The glucose is used by all the cells in the body. And when you have table sugar, when you have sucrose, what that is those two things just put together. They're just bonded together by a very small bond. And as soon as you hit your stomach, that hits the stomach, the acid breaks it down, and that bond breaks, and now you've got 50% of your calories coming from glucose, and you've got 50% of your calories coming from fructose. And so those 50% that are coming from glucose are going to go to all the cells in your body, and the 50% of the calories that are in fructose are going to go to your liver. And the way that your liver is going to break it down is going to be different. And so glucose, six-membered ring, it's used by all the cells in the body. It raises your insulin. So now that's where type 2 diabetes becomes a problem, because too much glucose fires insulin. Insulin docks with the receptor. The receptor now gets overworked, and the cell doesn't like to be overworked by that receptor. And now you take this receptor off the wall and you become insulin resistant. And now that's type 2 diabetes and you have a problem. So you got to watch out with your amount of glucose that you take, but your body is going to use it. And the other thing is that insulin stimulates leptin. And leptin is a chemical that's really it comes from fat cells, and it tells the brain, hey, I'm done. I've had enough. I don't need any more of this. And that leptin signaling from the fat cell to the brain is what makes us stop eating. And it's super important that we get that signaling, and we get it from glucose. So we don't get it from fructose. Fructose does not stimulate leptin. And fructose does not stimulate insulin. Because it doesn't stimulate insulin, it also doesn't stimulate leptin. And so it doesn't keep us from continuing to eat. And if you look at a bottle of Coke, it's got like 50 something grams of salt in it. It like I couldn't remember exactly what Dr. Lustig was saying on the video just a few minutes ago that I was watching, but there's a high amounts of sodium. There's in soft drinks. Well, what does sodium do? It causes your body to change the amount of water that it's dealing with. And so plus it makes you more thirsty. So the more you have, and if it's something super salty, you don't really want to drink it. If you just took salt water and just drank it, it'd be kind of disgusting. So what do they do to cover the salt? They add the fructose. They add the fructose, the high fructose corn syrup, to it because it's cheap. It's super cheap. And that's why it's in everything. It's in breads, it's in cookies, it's in cakes, it's in Cokes. It's like there's so much high fructose corn syrup. There's a lot of it in baby formula. And so we can run out of that. So I want to. Fructose is a poison. If we naturally consume fruits and vegetables, we get about 15 grams of fructose in our diet. Now, adolescents today, and this was when we first did this back in 2010 or whatever, are ingesting 72.8 grams, 12.1% of total caloric intake, and 25% consumed at least 15% of their calories from fructose. So we've got this massive fructose load. And what happens? And I don't have much time, but I'm going to try to break this down. So, if you eat a piece of white bread that doesn't have any fructose in it, there's no fructose corn syrup, and it's just glucose. If you had 120 calories of that bread, 96 or 80% is used by all the organs in the body. 96 calories, which means 24 calories is going to go to the liver. Now, when the liver processes that six ring structure, it's gonna go through this whole metabolic process, and at the end, it's going to come out as citrate, and which turns sugar into fat, and you increase citrate down the line increases your VLDL cholesterol, but you only end up with about a half a calorie of VLDL cholesterol when you eat white bread. So it's you're not causing problems for yourself. But if you took that same 120 calories of sugar and you said, okay, well, now 50% is glucose and 50% is fructose, well, from the glucose, we're going to get 12 calories. And from the fructose, we're going to get 60 calories because all of it's going to the liver. Now you've got 72 total calories going to the liver. So 120 calories of white bread ends up with 24 calories going to the liver. 120 calories of sucrose, of sugar, ends up with 72 calories going to the liver. And the way the liver processes the 5-ring structure versus the 6-ring structure ends up with large amount of citrate, and it ends up increasing VLDL cholesterol, and you get things like gout, hypertension, and cirrhosis because fructose in the liver is just like ethanol in the liver, which is alcohol. Alcohol in the liver, we know, creates cirrhosis of the liver. So does fructose in the liver. It's the same thing. It's fermented corn, whatever, corn whiskey, right? The alcohol is the fructose that causes the cirrhosis of the liver. It's the same thing when we take the fructose in there in like table sugar or high fructose corn syrup, where we're getting that extra load. And that is the problem right there. That's a big deal. That's the calorie is not a calorie. 120 calories of straight glucose is not the same as 120 calories of glucose and fructose mixed together. The way your body metabolizes that is different, and the things that end up down on the bottom end of that is what causes us to be bad. The last thing I'm going to say before the end of the show, the cholesterol comes in two patterns, pattern A and pattern B. Pattern A cholesterol and low triglycerides. And that fat raises a LDL, and that's large and buoyant and doesn't cause a problem. Pattern B is low HDLs and high triglycerides. They're raised by carbs, and that's the one that gives you the problem. Hey, that's the end of the show. Thank you guys very much. Thanks for your patience in the show. You guys have a Merry Christmas. We'll be back on Tuesday. I'll finish this thought up right here just so you can see it, because we actually had this in the office today. We had this question because that if you're worried about your cholesterol, and this is not coming from me, this is coming from Dr. Lustig. So I want to make sure that you do understand that this is coming from Dr. Lustig right here. If your HDLs are high and your triglycerides are low, and the normal for triglycerides is like 150. So if you're down below 100, if you got low triglycerides, I think the last time I checked my triglycerides, it was 36 or something like that. And if you've got over 40 or to 50 on your HDLs, if you're up there and your HDLs are in the high 50s or 60s or 70s, then you've got large, buoyant LDLs, and that total cholesterol is not going to cause, it's just going to float around in your blood. But if you have pattern B LDLs, which means you have low HDLs and you have high triglycerides, that's where you get the VLDL cholesterol. That is the small, dense one that gets in there between those vessels and starts causing plaque buildup and causing the problems. And that's the part. That's where it gets into cholesterol. And if you want to go watch that show, that video on our website, go to therockhealthwellness.com videos. He breaks it all down for you so that you know exactly what it's supposed to do and why it matters. So the carbs, especially the fructose, it's the fructose that causes this problem. And people are always they're wondering how come I've got all these health problems. And it's like it's 50% of sugar. And when I say sugar, I'm not just talking about just candy. You got to watch out for that fructose wherever it might be hidden because 50% of regular white sugar is fructose and 50% is glucose. And there's where a lot of our health problems come in. So and when you're eating healthy, you got a better chance of staying healthy than when you're not. So you guys enjoy your Christmas cookies. I know you're going to eat them anyway. So just enjoy them. And when you are eating your Christmas cookies, I hope you think of me. I hope you think of Dr. Clemmons is like, oh my gosh, he's right behind me. He's looking at me. He's listening to me. He's watching me eat these Christmas cookies. Yeah, I hope you think of me. I hope you guys have a fantastic Christmas break. We'll be back here on Tuesday. And